Sustainable Culinary ThinkLab, the podcast on sustainability in gastronomy.
Welcome to the Sustainable Culinary ThinkLab podcast, a joint project of the Culinary Institute of America and the Barcelona Culinary Hub, in which we talk with different experts around the world about food, the restaurant industry, and one of the most critical issues of our time, sustainability. We will learn together and discuss both issues and practical solutions with the professionals who are leading the change we need.
In today's podcast, we want to introduce you to Selassie Atadika, chef and founder of Midunu and its non-profit arm, the Midunu Institute, and founding member of Trio Toke, the first nomadic restaurant in Dakar, Senegal. After over a decade spent engaged in humanitarian work with the United Nations and years of self-teaching in the culinary arts, Chef Atadika completed course work at the Culinary Institute of America. Midunu is a lifestyle company as well as a nomadic and private dining enterprise in Accra that embodies new African cuisine. It celebrates culinary heritage where culture, community, and cuisine intersect with environment, sustainability, and economy by employing biodiverse and indigenous ingredients, including traditional grains and proteins to deliver Africa's bounty to the table. A favorite part of the Midunu dining experience is its final course, delectable handcrafted chocolate truffles, which Chef Selassie uses as base to feature the flavors and essence of Africa. In 2017, she was honored as one of the global top 50 plant-forward chefs by EIT Foundation and the CIA. In 2018, she served as a Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture Exchange Fellow. And in 2019, she was a finalist in the Basque Culinary World Prize within the top 100 in the Best Chefs Awards 2020-2021 and 2021 recipient of the La Liste New Destination Champion Award for Africa. She holds a Master in International Affairs from Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs and a Bachelor's of Geography modified with Environmental Studies from Dartmouth College. Selassie Atadika has been sought for her thought leadership by CNN African Voices, the Financial Times, the Danish Broadcasting Corporation, Omvalden, as well as mentioned in Vogue, National Geographic's The Plate, Entrepreneur, and Ebony. African cuisine is one of the main plant-forward diets in the world. How can we learn from Africa's heritage in cuisine? And how could we preserve our local food? Should a chef also have an impact in their community? To talk about all those items, Santimas de Chachas Faust, co-director of the Torribera Mediterranean Center, and myself, Mariel Colman, professor of nutrition and researcher at Barcelona Culinary Hub, will be discussed with our guest, Selassie Atadika. Hello, Selassie. It is a pleasure to talk to you, and we will be very interested in your work. And there are many phases of your work. Could you tell us what does Midunu mean and what does your institute do?
Okay, so Midunu is actually a short version of an Evan name, word, I should say. It's short for Va Midunu, which means come, let's eat. So normally, whenever you're eating or you're about to start eating, you invite everyone around you to join you in what you're eating. And I think for me, one of the beautiful parts of our many cultures is the invitation to have others join you to eat. When we were growing up, I'm from Ghana, but I grew up in the U.S. whenever my father would come home from work, he would always literally, say "Va Midunu," and that was how all of us would come to the table. And so that's something that I wanted to carry with me, but also because it also speaks to the democratization of food and the importance of all of us being able to eat. The Midunu Institute really focuses on trying to preserve our culinary heritage. So prior to becoming a chef, I spent over a decade traveling around the African continent to, I think, about somewhere over 40 of the 54 countries. And I just got to see the amazing cuisine in its different forms, using different ingredients depending on the location, and seeing how even with some of the same ingredients, they were cooked differently from, region to region or country to country. And I just realized that in many parts of the continent, we know more about, European food than we know about our neighbors. And so I wanted to share that, and not only just share it, but the first part of the business was really about celebrating. So how do we bring these ingredients to the table to celebrate, while the nonprofit is really about how do we take time to preserve and make sure that the foundation of what our cuisines are based on is documented.
I think you already talked about it a little bit, but I think while you were working in the UN, one of the things that you learned precisely is that the food, regardless of the situations, always brings people together and help them to overcome any situation they're facing, no? And Midunu, yes, you offer also what you call the nomadic experiences. Can you explain a little bit what those experiences are about and what the concept involves?
As I was traveling around to the various countries, I realized that I was getting a very unique opportunity that most people never had a chance to. I got to experience the food from many different cultures within the continent, but also was very aware that even within the continent, a lot of us were not able to try food from other countries or from other regions. And so I wanted to come back and give people this opportunity and chance to sort of taste all these amazing foods that I had experienced, and in many ways bring back a lot of the pride and dignity to our cuisines, which I felt had been taken out for many different reasons, whether it's from the introduction of cash crops and sort of the decimation of indigenous agriculture, or whether it was from sort of modernization, globalization, and food trends coming in from other parts of the world. But I really wanted people to have this chance. Coming back to Ghana after, I think I left when I was 7. I left Ghana when I was 7. And when I moved back, I think I'd been out of the country for over 30 years. And I had to sort of, I lived very many ways a nomadic life, moving from country to country for my job, but I also wanted to give Ghanaians a chance to see different parts of the city. So the dinners would move from location to location every month, and we had a communal dining table so people could really experience a new space and new people. So that was the dining experiences that we were offering. So these sort of large communal tables with multi-course meals and ingredients, usually local, but cooked in a different way, showcasing dishes from around the continent. While I was traveling, one of the things that I realized in many ways was that a lot of the restaurants in most of the capital cities were not of that country. You would find sort of in Ghana we call them chop bars, and in francophone countries they would call them a maki. But these are sort of like the more casual spots that you kind of find where you would eat local food. But in terms of restaurants where when my family would visit, I could take them to, there were very few places that were showcasing local dishes or traditional dishes, and I would have to kind of wait for one of my friends to invite me over so I could bring my family to try the food from that country. So I wanted this experience to be different. I wanted to upfront showcase food from the continent in a way that brought a lot of pride and dignity to the table.
So in line with what you're saying, for example, visiting any European city, you could find dozens of Asian restaurants as well as South American or Arabs restaurants. But what about African restaurants. Its gastronomy is still largely unknown for most people. Why do you think it's that?
I think there's a lot of different reasons. Everything from, just ignorance to lack of, I think, curiosity. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of people, when they think of the continent and food, most of them are first thinking of food insecurity rather than the lush bounty which the continent has to offer. There are, luckily now, a lot more restaurants that are coming into the midstream. But the restaurants are there. It's curious because I get invited to places and sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm not sure customs will let me have that. So I'll contact people in the country and actually the ingredients are there. So usually it's a lack of curiosity. I think, sadly, the world sometimes needs somebody else to determine something as the it thing. And in many ways, it's kind of like, at the beginning, it was like, we could only talk about French food. And that was the only thing that was amazing. And then now it's like expanded. And then you start to see even on the restaurant lists, there's so many other cuisines that are coming in there and so many other regions that are being represented. But it's almost like somebody needs to say, hey, guys, it's okay. You can try it now before people actually decide. And unfortunately, in many ways, it's the white supremacy culture, I think, that determines it. And even if you want to say in gastronomy, it's kind of the French space of sort of saying, oh, okay, we are the bastion of, culinary. But at the end of the day, every single culture has amazing food, has developed beautiful ingredients that they grow in their region, that they've turned into something amazing and delicious. How we define it is up to each region and the specificities of their climate and their religion and all these other layers of culture and custom and what we call foodways. But every single culture has delicious food, and sometimes we may not understand ingredients. I always say that we all have our smelly cheese, or we all have our smelly food, whether it's like a Roquefort or a Camembert that people are like, ooh, it's kind of strong, but there's kimchi, there's sauerkraut, and every culture has a ferment, something that they're doing that is really amazing and beautiful. Some might be considered acquired taste, and others after time kind of do their transition. But I think learning the stories behind food makes them that much more beautiful and that much sweeter.
Yeah, totally. Eh? And linked precisely with this, not because we were talking about, you were mentioning that we need sometimes somebody else to tell us that our cuisine is interesting, and especially if it's a white chef, man, that it will be more hurt.
Yeah.
But it seems that you have been able to break that glass ceiling, and you are receiving a lot of recognition for your talent, but also you are putting African cuisine a little bit on the map. How have you been able to do that? Why do you think you are one of the, not the first ones, but one of them right now that are having more recognition? And what advice would you give to other African chefs that are also thinking about being proud or also focusing on African cuisines and not so much international cuisines in order to get that recognition?
I think that a lot of maybe my success has to do with timing, because there are a lot of people who've come before me who've put in a lot of groundwork and who have honored food from different parts of the continent. I was just, when I took the Pro Chef program at the CIA in Hyde Park, I saw the course syllabus, and I saw that, there was conversation around French cuisine. And then there was, I think Pro Chef 2 covers a little bit of Mediterranean cuisine. And I think, I don't remember whether it's Asian in this one, but Pro Chef 3 then brings in, I think, Asian cuisine. There's a little bit of Latin American cuisine in there as well. And I sort of was like, hey, but, when is African cuisine going to be featured, And there was silence. And they literally said, well, maybe you're the one that's going to have to write that chapter. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. I went back a few years ago, and as I was there, I asked to the room of students, and I said, how many of you have tried African cuisines from any part of the continent. And I think two people raised their hand. And one was a woman of Ghanaian descent. And so her, I think grandfather was, her mom basically cooked some dishes for her grandfather. So she got to taste some. And then there was another student who was of Egyptian descent. And so he had tried North African dishes. And that was literally it. So, chefs are supposed to be curious people. And we're supposed to be trying, amazing flavor, ingredients, and all this sort of stuff. So it's hard to sort of see that break in the system. But in terms of like success, I think for me, for me, it's a celebration. I've just been trying to find ways to honor and celebrate all the experiences that I've had around the continent and sharing the stories behind the dishes. And I think for me, it's about humanizing the food. In many ways, the continent has been dehumanized. And I have just really tried to be a storyteller. That's what I do. And I sometimes say that it's not about me. It's actually about the people who I've met, and I'm sharing their stories because they unfortunately have done amazing work, but have never been able to sort of share what they've done with others. So I hope to be someone who is helping them share their stories. So for me, I think in terms of giving advice, I would say for other African chefs and up and coming young chefs, I think at the end of the day, you need to fall in love with your food, or fall in love with your region, fall in love with your ingredients. And it's a love story. Your cuisine is a love story to those ingredients, or to your culture, or to, the principles that you think are important. And I think once that is clear to you, you express that and people can feel, taste, and see that. So what I would say is really, particularly for African chefs, we haven't had a chance to tell our story. And so rather than talk about somebody else's ingredients, do the research, do the homework, understand your ingredients and how and why they came to be that way, and share that at the table.
Selassie, all the work you've been doing over the years and the recognition you have received along the years have made you a kind of ambassador of the new African cuisine. Could you tell us what do we mean by when we're talking about new African cuisine?
Yeah. So when I was coming back to Ghana, I was trying to figure out, what do I call my food? How do I describe it? And I decided to coin the term new African cuisine. So that was around 2014. And for me, the definition for new African cuisine is where culture, community, cuisine intersect with environment, sustainability, and economy. I wanted to create a food that was more than just delicious, more than just beautiful, not necessarily modern, but in many ways, new African cuisine is a little tongue-in-cheek because it actually has roots in the past. So when we talk about, I say culture, going back and understanding the cultural piece of some of these dishes there, because of either, for example, if you look at Ethiopia, they're Orthodox Catholics. And so they have, I think, about a third of their calendar year are feast days. So they have to eat vegetarian. So there's an amazing, beautiful vegetarian cuisines that have developed there that are flavorful and just delicious. There are feast days. For example, in Ghana, we have on Tuesday, there's no fishing. There's no fishing on Tuesday. And until today, if a fisherman goes fishing on a Tuesday, the chief will have a problem with him and you'll have to respond, because those are traditional mechanisms of sustainability. You leave the ocean one day to rest for everything it has given us. So I started going through some of these reasons, and I really felt that they were beautiful and needed to be told and shared. So that's the cultural piece. Community, I think community is trying to link everybody from the farmer to the person having the food at the table. How do we share that story and create community dining experience where we have this communal table for people to come together? Then on the other side, we talk about sustainability, economy, and let's see, we talk about sustainability, economy, and environment. And for me, the important thing was what grows here, right? If we eat what grows here, we're actually going to be doing much better in terms of sustainability, because we're also going to be putting money right back into the economy where we are. So the producers where we are need to be supported. And the environment offers us a lot of answers. So I started, when I came back to Ghana, asking myself, okay, well, we have a lot of millet, we have a lot of sorghum that grows here. Why are we not eating it? Answering that question actually taught me a lot, but also answering that question is the solution to the future. If we know that we're going to have a lot of desertification and we're going to have, more, the climate changes are going to have less water or erratic water, poor quality soil, these ingredients already do well there. So what are some dishes that are using it? How do we encourage people to keep growing those ingredients? And so for me, bringing all that together onto the plate, in addition to sort of the more classic texture, flavor, colors, and that normal sort of deliciousness, for me, the deliciousness was a bigger story. I was bringing more people to the table, empowering more people in the community, and looking forward while looking back. So in Ghana, we have these symbols. They're called Adinkra symbols. And there's one called Sankofa. And it's sort of a picture of a chicken that's facing forward, and it has its neck turned around to the back. And it has sort of a golden egg sitting in its mouth. And the symbol literally means go back and get it. And it talks about learning from the past to help you move forward into the future. And so for me, these are the concepts that I bring together when I talk about new African cuisine.
Beautiful example. And precisely you were already mentioning about sustainability. And one of the main drivers now, we are all looking for a healthier and more sustainable diet, but that's impossible to do without moving to a more plant-forward diet. And I think there are plenty of examples now. There's a good African model on plant-forward. What do you think that model can what does it represent, and how can it be exported to other food cultures?
Yeah, I think that if I'm not mistaken, it's the African continent is probably still the most plant-forward continent in the world. We can also look and see that a majority of sub-Saharan Africans are lactose intolerant. And in terms of how we eat traditionally, we are getting our proteins from a lot of beans, nuts, seeds. Whether you're in West Africa and you're using egusi, which is a wild melon seed, or peanuts or groundnuts, bambara beans, and in addition to sort of just being great sources of protein, when treated right, they have beautiful textures that they can add creaminess to dishes. And so you start to see that as a traditional way. Clearly, they're modern, the modernization and the middle class diet has also caught up to a lot of our countries. And so you start seeing the addition of animal proteins. But when you go back to a lot of these dishes, traditionally, a lot of our diets, like everywhere else in the world, has been plant forward. Definitely, we are getting sort of that middle class diet into a lot of countries as well. And so you start to see the addition of animal proteins. But so in Ghana, we have a couple of dishes that I can easily point to that are fully, balanced in terms of protein and fats and carbohydrates. And one of them is called red. And this is a dish where there's a use of beans, and it's served with plantain, and there's palm oil used in the dish as well. And this is not the palm oil sort of conversation around sort of mass destruction of land, but the way that palm oil is used and harvested in West Africa traditionally is completely different. But this dish has, it has its protein, it has its fats, it has its carbohydrates, so it's completely balanced. There are many more examples of that, but even things like our street food. My car broke down, I think, one of my first years back in Ghana. And while I was waiting for a mechanic, I kind of, was a little hungry. So sometimes even the most simple street food that you will find is beautifully balanced. There's one called Kofi Brokman. And it's a dish that literally is meant for everybody. It's broke man means, even a broke man can afford it. It's roasted plantains and roasted groundnuts, which are both readily available everywhere in Accra and in many parts of the country. Plantain is not expensive. The peanuts are not expensive. And it's a balanced meal with protein and carbohydrates. It's a dish that I fell back in love with when my car broke down and I was waiting for my mechanic and got hungry. So actually, I ended up, buying the plantain and groundnuts. And after that, I turned it into a dish that's actually, till this day, actually our most favorite dessert. It's two versions of plantain. One when it's green. And another version of the plantain on the dish when it turns black, and we don't throw it away. So in terms of sustainability practices, the black plantain is, I've turned it into a cake from a recipe that is from Liberia. And then there is peanuts or groundnuts that are served on the dish in at least two different forms. One is a traditional street food snack, which involves roasted corn, ginger chili, but also bringing in sort of the bar snack of just roasted groundnuts. And it's finished off with tiger nut, which is an ingredient that I know is also very readily available in Spain. It's chufas.
Yeah.
We use that. I use that to finish the dish off, and it's been fantastic because everybody loves it here when I do it in Ghana. Mm-hmm. But I've also done it and had a Michelin-starred former dessert chef who is now an executive chef. She tasted it and she was like, "This is amazing. This is perfectly balanced." And so it's nice to be able to take those ingredients and take what. For me, I really wanted to elevate a street food, but also like a bar snack, and turn it into something that had a much higher value. Because what happens is, as people also, life moves on. Middle class people are not always going to have the time to stop and buy this snack. But when I serve it, everybody understands it. It's a dish I now call Kofi Richmond.
So, Selassie, before you mention a beautiful thought about the importance of to look back to better look forward. In your daily work, can you tell us how do you use traditional African cooking techniques and how do you bring it to haute cuisine?
Well, to be honest, I sometimes feel that a lot of our cuisines are the original slow food. So the techniques take time. So we find ways, in many ways, I think fine dining is some of the stuff that you don't have the time or energy to do at home, right? So how do you take some of these flavors, techniques, and build them into something new? So one of the things that we do, which is our very first course with us, is our water course. So water is something that, particularly in Ghana, when you arrive at someone's home, you are greeted with water. It's a sign of hospitality. And I wanted to make sure I respected that element. And so we start off with something that I call smoked water. And it's a dish or a course that came up by accident. I was talking to a friend outside after one of my dinners, and he's like, "Oh, wow, the palm tree, this piece of the palm tree, my mom uses it to make this water in the house, and it has a beautiful flavor." And I'm like, "I don't know about this technique. Like, can she teach it to me?" So my team and I actually went to his mom's house, and she taught us how to smoke this water. And basically what you do is you take a ceramic pot and you take a piece of that palm tree, you light it, and then cover that with the ceramic pot. The ceramic pot now has holes in it, so it absorbs and holds onto that smoke. And then when you pour water into it, it now infuses it into the water. The ceramic pot also allows the water to stay cool in our climate. And so when visitors come, you can give them cold water. That palm piece is also used almost how I think Native Americans would use sage as a cleansing element. It's also known for kind of clearing negative energy. And so there are many different reasons why we do it. But this water is something that we started with. And we ended up this year using it as a technique for the chocolates. So what we did was we decided that we were going to do a smoked cream truffle. And so we smoked the cream in that traditional manner, and then use that to make the ganache that we were making for our chocolate truffles. So it had an amazing, beautiful flavor. And it's interesting because a lot of people associate smoke with umami and savoriness. So it was a truffle that really took people in a lot of different senses. But it's also, the technique and the water that we start off with. There was joining us as we were testing the menu out. And she took a sip of the water and she crying. She just said, "My grandmother," because the last time she'd had that water was from her grandmother. So it's not really just, for visitors and tourists and people coming to Ghana, but for people in Ghana, we've lost that moment too. So it's something that she hasn't had. I mean, even with my team, whenever we have new team members and I'm trying to explain the smoked water, they don't understand until I give them a cup. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, this is the one we have in the village." And I'm like, "Yes, it's what you have when you go to the village." So it's bringing these things back and having people to jog people's memory. And for me, that's just beautiful.
And linking precisely with what you just mentioned, Selassie, I seen the presentation you gave at Harvard Science and Cooking Conference that was called The Science of New African Cuisine. And you invited your attendees to close their eyes. And I invite all the listeners now to do the same and think about a dish they loved, the emotions, the memories that dish generates in each of them. And then you said to them, imagine now that this dish no longer exists. And I did it and I said, wow, no, can it be? No, it's frightening. And yet it's so true. We are losing ingredients. You just mentioned the smoked water brought so many memories to people that had forgotten them, and we are losing biodiversity. We are losing ingredients. So literally, as we speak, we are losing dishes and part of our culture. No, how you link? How do you think we can do for stopping this?
For me, I think there's two ways to go about it. One way is to find new and exciting and fun ways to use some of these ingredients that are kind of on their sort of losing favor. So for example, even with our chocolates, there's ingredients that we put in there that people are kind of like, "Oh, I forgot about that ingredient," or I need to learn more about it. So for me, the chocolates is a platform where I try to highlight some of these ingredients and techniques. But I think we also need to be, if we can be very honest, is to ask ourselves, who are not only, who's promoting biodiversity and trying to bring these things back, but who's working against it. So how do we also actively understand those who are preventing it and try to find ways to either slow them down or for us to find ways for us to create collaborations? And I always say it's challenging because in the current state of things, money is the biggest resource in how these things move. So even if you were to say, this is an amazing ingredient, the question is there an association or a board behind it that can do a marketing campaign? And if not, then it becomes a very difficult challenge. Then you have to bring together like-minded people who are all going to focus on this one ingredient to move it forward. So I would say that we need to work in two ways. Understand, for those of us trying to promote, how do we understand the bottlenecks in both supply and demand for some of these ingredients and techniques? Then how do we as people encourage and find ways to facilitate production and also encouraging promotion, and then moving it forward? So I'll give the example of millet because it's one of my favorite ingredients. Millet is something that when I came back, I was like, well, obviously, why are we not eating so much millet? We should be eating more millet than rice. And everybody in Ghana is eating rice like 2 or 3 times a day. So I asked my team to make some millet. I had tried to use it in a whole grain fashion. So we boiled it, and then I wanted to make it into a fresh salad using seasonal mangoes and fresh herbs and beautiful acidity. And we did it. So first they went to the market. to buy the millet. They came back. They had to, clean it out because it's manually thrashed on the ground. And then they cooked it and finished preparing the dish. It looked beautiful. I asked them to give me the dish. I took my first bite and it was like, second bite, and it was stones. There were stones, and I was like, okay, guys, did you clean it? They're like, we put it on the tray. We picked out all the stones we could see. And then I said, okay, well, all right, this is not working out. Let me call my cousin. My cousin grew up in Bolgatanga. And so she was like, come to the house this weekend and I'll show you. When I get there, she has 2 calabash, a big one and a small one. And then she takes the calabash, fills it with millet, and the big one is filled with water. Using the basic principles of density, she sticks the calabash into the water and she's waving the other hand. So they're like waves of water going in, lifting up the light millet and putting it into the bowl, the bigger calabash, while the heavier stones would stay at the bottom of the calabash. So we did it together. I came back to my kitchen on Monday and I'm like, hey guys, I got a great idea. We figured it out. We're going to do this. And they're like, very much in many ways, I'm still a foreigner. So they're like, oh, this woman from America, this Yankee woman wants to, teach us how to deal with millet. And I'm like, okay, well, let me show you. And then they are looking at me like it's magic. They're literally looking at like, it's magic. And I'm like, great. We figure out how to clean the millet. We make the salad again and it's delicious. I've now figured out why most women who finish working and come home at 5 o'clock are not ready to buy millet to cook for their families. I figured out one bottleneck. Now, the second one was we had to go to the local market. So if she's a middle-class woman and going to a grocery store, millet is not available in our grocery store. So second barrier to entry. And at the same time, now you're seeing that the local farmer knows that it's going to go into the market. So he's not going to go and buy a machine to have improved processing. So there is a supply and demand issue. Also in Accra, people only know 2 recipes that are using millet. While in my conversation with my cousin, she gave me like 11 without even blinking of all the different ways in which millet could be used. So I realized that step 1, bottlenecks on both the supply and demand side. Step 2, I don't know. It's me and my best friends and my other chef friends that need to put it on our menu, that need to get bloggers to write about it while we're trying to fix the supply situation. Maybe there's going to be an equipment that can be shared at community level. So it's not going to just be one person that's taking the cost, but they need to have access to a grocery store and to be able to know that people are going to pay a premium for the work that they're doing. It also, to be honest, requires mass consumers to convince a farmer because we don't want to put them at risk, right? So in order for this farmer to be excited about it, maybe we need a government contract from hospitals.
We lost you.
That's going to be using the millet.
We lost you in a government contract. Maybe we need a government contract. Right. So, and I'm going to take the opportunity to say that this should be the last question before we move to the fixed questions. Marielle, if you want. Sure. So once Selassie finish, then we can just, because it's already, even with the stops that we have had, we are around 45 minutes already, 43. So after that, that Selassie finished this question, maybe we can move to the other ones, which should be quicker and just a question and answer and with short answers. Okay, so you can pick it up from when we were asking, which is so interesting. I'm sorry to have to stop, but the contract with the government.
So, to really encourage farmers, because I think at the end of the day, they're the ones doing the hard work and taking the risk for all of us. They're going to be more excited if they know that they're mass consumers. So let's say there are larger contracts, whether it's a beer factory, maybe it's a food processing company, maybe it's a government contract that's going to say school feeding, hospitals, police, military, are going to be consuming this product in the next 2 years. So please, let's all decide to put our energy and money behind this and invest. That's going to make a farmer excited. And then actually putting all of it together to start the sort of a campaign. And this is, for me, it's my millet project, which is like in my mind, understanding what are the bottlenecks, how do you build supply and clean up the supply system, and how do you encourage that demand for these ingredients? And that's just one example, but I think it's important for, whichever country, culture to identify some of these ingredients and bring together the right stakeholders to create this momentum around some of these ingredients to allow them to last the test of time. And a lot of it is finding new purpose for them.
So a word that came out a lot of times during our conversation was sustainability. We know that sustainability in the food world often refers to environmental sustainability and regenerative food systems, as well as the betterment of people, cultures, and financial sustainability or profitability. What is the most important to you when you think of sustainability?
For me, sustainability really speaks towards culture. And the importance of being respectful of all cultures. And I think, when we talk about agriculture and everything else, it's about communities. And that's the beginning of us settling down as people and going from hunters and gatherers to settled people. So how do we make sure that the cultures where these ingredients and the biodiversity comes from is respected? If we're not careful in terms of sustainability, most of the marginalized communities are the ones that are going to lose the most. And the scary part is we don't actually even know what they have, meaning that it's not documented. So we are actually losing what we don't even know. And many times, because these communities are also the most resilient, we're losing a lot of our resiliency as a global community.
So, and which practice then, if you will have to choose, and I know this is simplifying everything too much, but if you will have to find for one best practice in innovation in sustainability for a chef, for example, that is working in a restaurant, what would that be?
Sorry, if you could repeat that again. Innovation in sustainability?
Yeah, so in sustainability, if a chef that is working in a restaurant today or in the industry wants to implement or start thinking to implement one innovation in sustainability, doing something new, something different, what do you think they should be focusing more initially?
I mean, for me, it's always about just finding new uses for what is left behind. So I think it's the innovation is sort of just being able to repurpose, and that repurposing could be using a different, using the leaves as well as the roots, but it also could be, how can I take this from something that is forgotten about and bringing it back to a place of importance on our table. So just repurposing and finding new uses for is, for me, innovation within sustainability.
And what are your reference, maybe people or businesses in terms of sustainability?
I'm actually a bit of I'm that crazy person that is literally talking to anybody who will have a conversation with me. So when I love getting a chance to travel and go to communities and just talking to the old women in the who are cooking or in the market. I learn a lot from them. And so for me, that's where my reference is actually, I'm a bit of an old soul. So it's talking to aunties, grandmothers, family members, or just random women that are cooking beautiful food on the street.
Thanks. For the audience who is listening to the podcast for the first time, those final questions that we are doing to Selassie very, very quickly are just some questions and common questions that we ask to all our guests. So that's why we are reviewing them and with short answers. So continue with those questions. There's only two more to go. Is looking ahead precisely, what professional challenges in terms of sustainability are you most concerned about?
I think for me, a lot of it has to do around biodiversity and value chains. I've realized in the work that I've been doing over the last few years in Ghana is that a lot of these ingredients just don't have a value chain. And it's going to be important for us to highlight them and to create them before they're gone. For example, one of the ingredients that we use in our chocolates is called inchui precasse. It doesn't have an English name, so it's actually on the list of Ark of Taste ingredients. for being endangered due to agricultural land use. And for me, these are things that we're losing. And so I think it's going to be important for us to create value for them so that we can create a value chain for them, because these have lost their value. Actually, not, how can I say it? There is no value chain for it because cash crops destroyed them. In many ways, the infrastructure built around cash crops destroyed them. So that would be it for me.
Okay, and finally, just to conclude, what advice will you give to others, and especially young people who want to make a difference in the food system in terms of sustainability, planetary health, and health for our communities?
I think for those of us who want to, and for the young chefs and cooks that want to make a change in our food system, I think that do the research, understand what the global food system actually looks like. Because I think in many ways we think buy local, but we don't also understand what the global food system does to smallholder farmers around the world. It's important to actually understand what the global system looks like first, and then choose the part that you can make an impact on, because we can't do everything. We all have to sort of choose our corner and do the work that we can do in that corner. And we all have our skills and talents, and to focus on that. So I think it's really about just kind of doing your homework and then kind of picking the one area that you feel that you can make an impact on, and go for it hard. The other advice that I would give is to collaborate with others, because the work is a lot. And without like partners and people that will move with you, sometimes it can be overwhelming.
Okay. So thank you very much, Selassie. It was a really pleasure to have this great talk to you, this great conversation. Thank you, Santi, also for this work.
No, thank you. And thank you, Selassie. Really, we could be talking here for hours. I know we have had some internet connections.
Got a lot to talk about.
And has made it a little bit more complicated.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the audience also. And thanks for joining us on this episode. And we invite you to join to the next episode. Thank you very much.
It is always a pleasure to share this time with you. We will continue discovering sustainable gastronomy together.